Boom, we are live for episode 90 of Trek Live.
Nice.
Yeah. First of all, Bill, how you doing this morning?
Doing really good.
Good.
Happy to be here. Got a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. So I'm really excited to dive in and see how much we can cover.
Yeah. What are we talking about today?
Today's kind of a catch-all. It's kind of like a catch-up on some news with the Picard show. There's obviously been a lot happening there. We have a title for the show. We have some images, like behind the scenes kind of leaks and maybe sort of official shot to kind of talk about. And then we're going to recap our rewatches in a more like full like part of the show way, as opposed to like just a little quick section at the beginning. Dan, I know you just finished TNG with All Good Things, so I'm really anxious to talk about All Good Things in a not just like reflective way, like generally in a bigger topic, but like having you just watched it as part of the whole show, part of the rewatch. And then last weekend I finished the TOS movies. So in the last couple of weeks, I watched all 6 of those and finished TOS kind of as a complete thing. And on Monday night, I watched What We Left Behind. I got to see that on the big screen. Nice. So I'm really excited to talk about that a little bit. And I don't want to get too much into it until you get a chance to see it. Yeah. Obviously, I'm going to stay spoiler free. I'm not going to talk about some of the more specific new cool things that they reveal in the movie, but I'm definitely excited to kind of just talk about it generally in a spoiler-free kind of way, like I said. We got Adam in here. How you doing, Adam? So,
yeah.
What do we want to do first?
I vote rewatch, and then we move into part stuff kind of at the end. So,
okay,
yeah.
What did let me start with what did All Good Things do well that some of the least successful Star Trek finales didn't? Like, what makes All Good Things really good, where as opposed to like Endgame and These Are the Voyages, what's the difference? Like, why is All Good Things good and those finales are not?
One of the things I noticed is that it didn't focus on wrapping characters up, and I think that some factors may have went into that because they had film deals lined up, but I think they did a great combination of not doing this wrap up kind of, but telling a great story, and bringing back kind of a character that we've known and kind of loved and didn't go over the top with it, and also gave every crew member something to do, so they were kind of involved in the story in some way or another. So I really liked that. Yeah, and it felt big too, just how the story was, written and structured. So, yep.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about All Good Things has always been kind of that exact thing, that it manages to be final, but it can't be really final because there are movies coming. So like you said, it can't focus on coming up with like clean endings for characters and trying to tie everything into a neat bow, because it's the last time you're going to see all these people. And they knew that wasn't the case, so they had the agency to kind of just do a really big TNG episode. But they did do a really good job of focusing. A lot of that story is about like how far the characters have come, like by jumping to the past and going to the future, where they're going and where they are now. It's all about their journeys, and how they've changed over the 7 years that we've been with the show. And I really like that. And I like that it encapsulates everything TNG does well. It's about the people, it's about the characters, but it's got this big science fiction element too. Like, it's got the Swiss Army knife all happening in one little package. It offers all this stuff, but it never feels overly jam-packed somehow. So,
yeah, and I feel like it has the perfect amount of
sentimentality.
Yeah. There is some kind of nostalgic going back to Q and kind of the beginning, but also that scene, just that small quick scene at the end when they're all playing poker. I feel like it's just the perfect, not too over the top, but definitely just quiet enough that it's really powerful. So I loved it.
I love that too. I love that the ending is kind of reserved. It's nothing grand and like over the top, but it is at the same time. Like
Yeah.
the show is all about these people. Like Star Trek has always kind of been, and we've talked about this on the show. The kind of the thread that kind of keeps all these shows together is oftentimes the theme of like finding a family wherever you are.
Yeah.
And these kind of orphans and people with difficult pasts and challenging upbringings find themselves in the situation, and they form their own family. And they've had this tradition of playing poker, kind of going back early on in the show. Picard's never there. He kind of keeps himself separate, and having him just come in and join that game and realize that he should have done this the whole time, and realizing that they are his family, and that's kind of what it's all about is the perfect way to end the show, because it's been what the show's been about the whole time. It's not as defined as like today's TV is, with like an obvious overarching theme that like pulls the whole show forward, that links everything together. It's very much in the background. It's very subtle. It's only there if you're really looking for it, and if you're going back and watching it over and over again, maybe you find it. But it's not like a definable trait that is present in every single episode. It's a subtle thing that's there from day 1 to day 178. But I love that they ended that way, and they don't feel the need to, because they have Generations coming a few weeks later, a few months later, I guess, in real time when it came out, to do anything over the top. They couldn't do anything over the top. They had to be prepared to run into a movie that has like all possibilities open.
Yep.
So it really finds the balance of doing like big things and being epic and being a finale but not being compelled to change the dynamic too much, I guess, which I think they achieved really well. I think if you go into it feeling like we can't change it, we can't do anything big, a finale you're running the risk of not being big enough and not being satisfying enough. You're not like capping anything off, but the show finds a way to do it while not shaking up the equation, which, I think is a really notable trait.
Yeah.
And like you
ahead.
also mentioned, no, you first. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna like talk about just where this ranks for me, like overall. I feel like this is top 3 TNG for me, at least. I don't know. What about you?
It's up there. It's definitely in top 3 or 4, I would say.
Yeah.
It's for me. It's Best of Both Worlds. It's Yesterday's Enterprise. It's All Good Things. Are probably the 3. I think Patrick Stewart is out of his mind good in All Good Things.
So
he's really teeing off.
So good.
He's really great in First Contact, especially, and he's got good moments in a lot of the other TNG movies, like little moments in Insurrection where he's really good, and Generations even. But this is to me like in some senses kind of his like last great performance as Picard. First Contact is for sure. Maybe not his last, but he's really, really great here, and it might be the best he's been as Picard for my money. The episode completely leans on him. I think he does a really, really, really great job, especially as future Picard, dealing with dealing with the aging and everything. Like it's there's elements of like over the topness to it for sure, but Patrick Stewart does a really good job of keeping it from becoming cartoony and over the top, to the point of like unintentionally funny. It never to me gets quite there. It skirts that line pretty well. It's got some funny moments, but he's really good throughout, and I think in all 3 chapters he's really strong. And like you said, bringing back Q is great, but like going back to the past and seeing Tasha Yar and O'Brien is really cool too.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and if you look at it, kind of back to it, this is kind of like tryouts for the movie, because a 2-parter to me always seemed like this really big, grand, like movie scale esque kind of episode. So I think that that also went into at least me watching it. I was like, this definitely really strong, even for a 2-parter. So
no, I couldn't agree more. I think it's clearly my favorite finale of the bunch.
Yes.
I love What You Leave Behind, Deep Space Nine's finale too, but I think this is in a league of its own.
Yeah.
For all the reasons we kind of just talked about. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other big things that I'm kind of forgetting.
Yeah, I mean, just me wrapping up the show. I don't know if we haven't decided to kind of if we're gonna do a comparison maybe down the road, but maybe I'll just talk about season 7. Season 7 to me is very dramatic. It takes on a lot of big topics and very dramatic topics, so it does seem a little bit different than the past seasons, and that's kind of been fun to explore going through it this time around. That's something that I've noticed. It's been very dramatic, and yeah. So I really enjoyed season 7, but there was a few that I loved, but I don't think there was like ones that maybe stand out as all time TNG besides maybe Lower Decks. But yeah, overall I love the season. So.
Going back a little bit before All Good Things, since you just finished the show, the episode before All Good Things is Preemptive Strike, which wraps up Ensign Ro.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the way they kind of resolved her character? Like,
I think
sending her to the Maquis and
I think it falls in line with more of what her character is and was. She's always been this rebellious type, and maybe people disagree with me. That's fine. That's why we do this. But I feel like that's in kind of line with her character. If we go back to early Ro, she was like this misfit, doing these like very dangerous missions and stuff. So I think it fits. Kind of looking at it comparatively with I don't know. I think it fits, and I think I wasn't upset, kind of the way I was with maybe Wesley, the way his character got wrapped up. But
right,
yeah,
I think it's definitely a more natural, easier to see the arc kind of resolving that way than Wesley. It makes sense that Ro would end up with the Maquis, but I like that, unlike where she was when you first meet her a few seasons ago. The decision's difficult for her. Like,
yes.
It's painful for her to do what she's going to do. It's a difficult choice.
Right.
And I think if this played out 2 seasons ago, she couldn't have gotten to the Maquis fast enough.
She wouldn't have.
That would have been
no.
That would be exactly where she would go, and it would make perfect sense.
Yeah.
She fits right in the mold of some of the characters we get to know in Voyager who are
right.
in the Maquis. Like, she's very much in that vein.
Yeah.
With who she is and what her background is, and what her life situation is. But the story is in the difficult choice she faces, I guess, in that episode. The struggle she has to go through to get to the point where she can kind of stab Picard in the back is satisfying. And yeah, I'm a fan of that episode for sure. It's in the upper half of season 7. I would say it's one of the 5 or 6 best episodes of the season. Yeah, actually, I think.
Agreed.
For me, absolutely, like you said, Lower Decks, All Good Things. I really like Pegasus. I like Parallels, Preemptive Strike. Episodes like that. There are definitely some strong ones, and like we talked about last week, season 7 is a really strong, like family backbone. Yeah, a lot of the characters have a lot of familial revelations happening throughout the season. Yeah, it kind of defines that season's identity, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Should we move on to your rewatch?
Yeah, sure. I've talked about a good handful of these movies on the last couple of episodes. 2 weeks ago, I talked about I think 1, 2, and 3. I think I had watched by the time we had gone, or maybe 1 and 2. And then last week I talked about 4 and 5. But collectively, I think it's pretty kind of remarkable how good the 6 movies are, and it's a weird kind of mix. I think what always strikes me is like 3, 4, and 5 kind of operate as like a soft trilogy. They weren't conceived as like a 1, 2, 3 trilogy, but they kind of back their way into that working. But what's weird about it is all three of those movies are so uniquely different. Like they're not the same thing by any stretch of the imagination. They're all completely their own thing.
Yeah.
And then the three non-movies in that threesome are the same thing. They're very individual. Like they're completely their own things. So it's not a series of movies that I think can be labeled as like a single thing. They're not like assembly line, same exact movie every time. Star Trek: The Motion Picture is completely different than Star Trek 6, and Star Trek 4 is completely different than Star Trek 3. But they somehow all work, and what makes it work is the characters.
Yeah.
You know, that's the sort of one common dynamic between this stretch of 6 movies. Something I would definitely, I really like Star Trek 6 a lot. I think it's kind of a perfect ending for that show. You know, TOS coming from the 60s and leaning really heavily into things like the Cold War, and dealing with the Klingons in that sort of way. I love the way that Star Trek 6 tackles, you know, the ending of the Cold War, the peace process in a very TOS way, very consistent with the way TOS handles these kinds of themes. But the thing that I like the most about the movie is that it makes the age of the characters an asset. Like it's not, it kind of embraces the fact that these guys are not spring chickens anymore. They're not the same people that we saw in TOS 25 years before. Kirk's not a blonde-haired, roguish, you know, young ladies' man captain anymore. He's just not. He's an old guy.
The grizzly, gray-haired, experienced guy.
And I think it's got some really mature stuff. Like it's all about, if you're gonna try to change the dynamic with like a long-standing adversary, like the hardest thing that you have to do, and the thing that's going to make it work, is not like changing the next generation's mindset and making your young people embrace the change. It's the elders, it's the people who have been through it and fought the battles and been there every day dealing with the adversary. They're the ones who have to overcome prejudice.
Right.
Kirk has to overcome what he thinks of the Klingons for it to have a shot. Just like the people on the Klingon side need to overcome theirs. I love that that's what that movie's about. And I, like I said, I think it's perfectly TOS. So that movie works really well for me. I know some people, it's underappreciated in some ways. I think 2 and 4 get a lot more love on the mainstream level. 6 is sort of maybe a step down from them,
right?
As far as like movies that people talk about. But it definitely gets a lot of love from a lot of people, like on Star Trek Twitter. Obviously, you know, when I posted that review, there were a lot of people saying that's my favorite one. I love Star Trek 6, but somehow I feel like it's underappreciated. I don't know why. I don't know what the difference is between 2 and 4 and 6, but yeah, I just really love that movie a lot. I think the battle is really great too at the end. It's, no matter how many times I see it, it's still, you know, is exciting every time.
And when I think about TOS and I think about the, you know, the end about 6, I don't think about Turnabout Intruder or any of the other movies. I think about 6. So. Yeah, no, for sure. 6 is by all, under most, it is the finale for that show. Right. It's unlike TNG, where I think of All Good Things as the finale and not Star Trek Nemesis. Yeah. It's like the end of that story. That's the TOS. The TNG movies somehow operate more as like add-ons and epilogues to TNG as the show, but with TOS, those movies definitely feel like a natural extension from the show a little bit more, and I think of them as like the final season almost of that series, kind of collectively. But yeah, I love those movies. The thing that kind of surprised me most going through them over the last couple of weeks is I do the MVP thing. I pick an MVP of everything I watch. And I picked Shatner 3 times. Shatner was my MVP for 2, 3, and 6. Yes.
And I was trying not to do that. And I didn't expect to do that. I figured 3, I kind of knew going in. 3 leans so heavily on Shatner's performance that I pretty well knew
it's
that
the Shatner show.
It's the Shatner show, and it's the Search for Spock for sure. But the Wrath of Khan, I was toying with. I thought going in, it could be the writing, it could be Nick Meyer's direction, it could be Ricardo Montalban, it could be a lot of things. But I think Shatner is what makes that movie work. He's amazing. And then the same thing with 6. I toyed with like the writing for all the reasons I just talked about, with the themes that the movie takes on. But I think Shatner is what makes it work. I think he does a great job playing that older guy. Who has the past that he has. I think he embodies everything that Kirk was and now has to overcome in a really kind of perfect way. So I did not expect to pick Shatner as the MVP of half of the TOS movies, and not Nimoy once.
Yes.
No Nimoy. I picked the score twice, both of Jerry Goldsmith's movies. I picked the motion picture and the Final Frontier. The score from both of those movies, and
just leave
I picked
leave it at that.
Leave it at that, yeah. And I picked the writing in Star Trek 4. So
nice. Very
very weird, but some unexpected. Not what I would have guessed. Coming in to that experience.
Yeah.
But
where do the movies rank for you?
If
you're looking at just the 6, where do they?
Just
where
the
do
6.
Yeah.
I go 2 and 4 at the top.
Okay.
Number 1 and 2. 6 third. Little bit of a gap from 6 to 3.
Okay.
And then 1 and 5. So, Wrath of Khan, Voyage Home, The Undiscovered Country, The Search for Spock, Motion Picture, Final Frontier.
Okay.
With a big gap between Motion Picture and Final Frontier. Yeah. So I gave 2 and 4 an A. I gave 6 an A minus. I gave The Search for Spock a B plus, Motion Picture a B, and The Final Frontier a C minus.
Okay.
So
we're still passing, yeah.
everybody passed. The GPA is really strong.
Yeah.
That C minus doesn't bring down the GPA much at all. So yeah, do any of those grades feel wrong to you? Do any of them feel low? Do any of them feel high?
The A minus. I don't know, but
you give it an A.
I give it an A. I give it an
A.
Yeah. But yeah, some people have different opinions. Enterprise Extra, but yeah.
We'll see. He's not huge on Star Trek 6.
He's not. It's all about the boots.
It's all about the boots.
Always quotes the boots.
Always quotes the boots. How would you rank the movies? I know you haven't watched them all succinctly.
Yeah.
Like that, but just on a gut level,
right now I have I think did you say 2-4?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think mine is the same as yours. Right now, when I think back,
you would have 2.
I would have 2-4. I really like 4, but I think 2 is just perfect. So.
Yeah, to me, they're both in the upper echelon of Star Trek as a whole.
Yeah.
They're both easily. I think when I'm all done ranking everything again, for the third time, it'll again be 2 and 4, in the top 25 Star Trek anything.
Yeah.
I think they're both as good as it gets. But like I said a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Star Trek 2, I could really. It's a you'd have to talk me off Star Trek 2 being the best thing Star Trek's ever produced. I really feel like that's the single greatest achievement in the history of Star Trek.
Yeah, I feel like 4 could give a run for its money, but I feel like again 2 it's just so iconic and perfect. So
they're both they both do really big. I can't knock. It's hard for me to really even compare because they both do such great things. Star Trek 4 does so much. First of all, Star Trek 4 operates without a villain. It's a big studio movie without a bad guy. The bad guy is us. It's funny. It's profound and emotional at times. It's so obviously a message movie, but it's so unapologetic about it that it somehow works. It's like not it's preachy, but who cares kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's so obviously like we're literally saving whales.
Yeah.
We're going back in time to save
That's
a
the
couple of
premise.
humpback whales. That's the like. Can you imagine pitching that?
Yeah. Oh,
it's
geez.
just crazy. It works. It's unbelievable how well that movie functions with such just a crazy premise. But Star Trek 2 at the same time, kind of similar to what I was saying about 6. I think the way it deals with aging and doing the Moby Dick thing, but making the villain of the movie Captain Ahab is a really creative and fun spin on that revenge idea. There's so many revenge movies where your hero is Ahab. I love that Kirk is Moby Dick. He's the white whale.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool idea and really makes that movie stand out among movies that try to do that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. We're approaching the 30-minute mark. Do you want to go on to Star Trek Picard?
Can I talk real quick about what we left behind? Just like real quick. I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't seen it. If you saw it in the movie theater, great. If you didn't, I think it's August 6th or something. It comes out on Blu-ray and DVD and streaming. From what I understand, it's really, really good. My one complaint with it would be I wish it could have been longer because there's so much to cover. There's some cute stuff at the very end where they kind of acknowledge how much they couldn't fit in, and check out the DVD for bonus features and stuff like that. There's a lot of material, and because it's really unapologetically like aimed at people who love the show. It's not trying to be a documentary about like broadly like this is how you make a TV show and this is like the history of a generic TV show that anybody can consume. Yeah. It's really putting somebody in front. Dan, if you tried to sit your wife in front of what we left behind, I don't think she'd get anything.
She'd be just lost.
Like, she'd be lost, and it wouldn't mean anything to her. Like the emotional punches probably wouldn't land at all. But if you love that show, if you have a history with that show, if you know that show, it's aimed right at you. And I kind of appreciate that. I appreciate that unapologetic quality of we know exactly who this is for, and we're aiming it right at them. So because of that, and because of how it's aimed that way, it felt. I mean, it was 2 hours, but it felt like 30 minutes. It's really fast paced. It flies at you. It's really consumable. But I wish there was more of it, and I can't wait for the Blu-ray to see what else they cover.
Bonus features.
Yeah, because I got to imagine there's a ton there. Everybody already knows just from following the making of it that they do this. What would the first episode of season 8 look like? That's awesome. That's really cool. I was shocked at how much it made me want that. Like I thought it would be kind of a cute little aside, but I didn't expect to be kind of wowed by the premise as much as I was. I was really into that, and I think they do that really well. The way that's worked into the documentary, I was kind of worried about that too. I didn't know how it was going to work. Yeah, because it's such a different thing than just talking heads talking about the show. But they do a really nice job of weaving that in, and that's probably my favorite thing about the doc. I think that's going to be the thing that people remember about it more so than the great interviews that are there. Mm-hmm. It's that writers they keep cutting back to the writers talking about breaking a story, and it's like a window into how that's done, which is really cool too.
Cool.
So definitely recommend it if you like Deep Space Nine. If you're watching this show at all, you're crazy if you don't seek it out.
Yep.
We'll definitely talk about it again in a few months when it's available to everybody, and Dan, you get to see it, and we can dive into maybe some of the bonus features too, and talk about it more deeply.
Yep.
Star Trek Picard.
Yes. I feel like it's kind of lining, the stars are aligning. I think Bill's kind of on the right track of rewatching TNG right before. I just finished, so it's really fresh for me too. So I think it's perfect to kind of perfect circumstances to start the show and even just talk about it. So
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of discussion online about the title of the show. What do you think? Do you have an issue? Do you think it's rude? Do you think it's fine?
I think I texted Bill. Like my first reaction was, how original. I like that they didn't get too fancy with it, too cute with it. I feel like all you need is the name Picard, and that says it all. So I think it works for me. I don't have an issue with it. It's fine.
Yeah, I think good friend of the show, Thad, who's not here right now, but is often here, on Twitter, mentioned that, a lot of the other shows kind of starting Deep Space Nine or Star Trek and the ship or the space station that the show is about.
Yeah.
And what I think this is kind of telegraphing is that this is a show that's about the person. It's not about whatever ship they're on or whatever mission they're on. It's going to be more of a personal story about this character. So, if that's I'd buy that. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't have a big issue. I mean, It's simple. It's exactly. People have been kind of speculating. Yeah, that's what it's going to be for a while now, and they kind of denied it. So I figured it might be not that. I was kind of surprised that it was Star Trek Picard, but I'm fine with it. I have no beef.
Yeah.
With it.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's 20 years after Nemesis?
I think it's 20 years after Nemesis.
20 years after Nemesis.
Yeah. And I think it's... Memory serves, it's been confirmed that he's kind of dealing with the beginning of 09, the catastrophe that destroys Romulus at the beginning of 09, which leads to the creation of the Kelvin timeline, or the entry, or our entry into that timeline. So we're going to see what happens in the
aftermath
timeline in the aftermath of that disaster. And I guess Picard has some involvement with that, which actually makes a lot of sense to me. The last time we saw Picard, it was Nemesis, and they had this big dealing with the Romulans and trying to make peace with the Romulans and blah, blah, blah. And he expresses some hope at the end of the movie that there might be a path forward with the Romulans. So maybe it stands to reason that he's working towards that, and this incident kind of throws that all into chaos. I don't know. Who knows how they're going to play it and what they're going to reference from the old show. But yeah, Adam says, "Is there any chance Picard is serving on a ship of his namesake? What is the Federation policy on naming ships after people? And do they have to be dead, like with being on a postal stamp?" Who knows?
Interesting thought. Yeah.
I have yet to hear anybody suggest that. That's an interesting thought. Yeah. You never know. Maybe he's on the USS Picard, and everybody will have to chill because it fits in perfectly with the rest of the shows.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of bringing in, the end of TNG. I don't know. I'm curious to see if that future is the future that we see, because at the end of that episode, it's like, well, no, that's a possible future or something that could, the way he's looking at it. So, I'm curious to see if, he's still dealing with those health issues, if what's the state of, Klingon Federation relationship. I'm always curious to dive into some Klingon issues maybe, and also see what characters are going to show up in this series. If it's just going to be, Picard, or if we're going to see some cameos, obviously, probably, which I'm fine with. But,
yeah, I'm fine with it too. I would be surprised if they can resist the temptation to do something with cameos.
Yeah.
Or a cameo. Who knows? I don't know how. Who knows how committed they'll be to not having. It seems like, from what I've read, that they don't want the show to. It's not like Star Trek: The Next Generation Part 2. Like it's about Picard, and Picard's at a different point in his life. So I don't think we're gonna get like Riker as a really recurring, regularly seen character. It's not the impression I get, but you never know. I mean, things change, and I think that's going to be a difficult thing to resist. Bringing some of the old characters back. I'm sure we'll get references, and I think maybe we'll see cameos, like you said. But yeah, the exciting thing about the show is that because it's 20 years and it's pretty close to where we are from Nemesis now, like it's contemporary. It makes sense from a contemporary standpoint,
right?
From a production standpoint, the possibilities are pretty much endless. You can bring anybody back you want, and I like that. It's a pleasant change of pace from some of the shows that they've done more recently, Enterprise, Discovery, where they're very sort of boxed in with what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
With this concept, they're really freed up to do pretty much whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
Adam says the only cameo of Wrecker he wants to see.
Yes.
Mounting a chair.
That's what I'm talking about, Adam. That is right.
I think we'll see it. I think something like that will absolutely happen.
Yes.
That seems like a safe assumption. Rob is here. Can't stay, but he's hoping for any cameos. He's asking us if we're hoping for any cameos, guest appearances, references from TNG, DS9, or Voyager. You can only pick a handful: Janeway, Vash, Darren, Ro, Guinan, and Moriarty. The ones that I'm most anxious to see, the ones that I would be most excited to see, Janeway would be great as a colleague of Picard. She's an admiral. I don't know who. It doesn't look to me like in some of the pictures that we see. We're going to get into that too, I'm sure, that Picard is in Starfleet anymore, and I think that was kind of hinted at early on in the development of the show.
Yeah.
But it stands to reason that Janeway would be an admiral. But so that would be cool to see. But I'd like to see Crusher, because I think Crusher has the most personal connection with Picard.
Yeah.
And I think it would make the most sense that she's somebody who maintains close contact with Picard 20 years later. Were they married? Did anything happen there? That's a question I really wanted to know. And I think there's a lot of there's a lot of dramatic potential to explore what did or didn't happen there. Guinan would be interesting because of that deep history and relationship. Any of the TNG characters would be welcome and would make sense on some level. But what about you? I mean, who stands out to you? If you could pick one person to see, who would you?
Beverly for sure. I know that they, in the finale, they said they got married, but then they got divorced, and then she's still in Starfleet. So, maybe they could work that in. She's still serving, or I don't know. I think people who I feel like have a stronger connection from the show should be in it in some fashion or another. Maybe it'd be just like a quick scene or something, really deep. I feel like Data, I don't know. I'll leave it at that, but something probably will be said about it. I think that those are the kind of characters that kind of jump to mind when I think, like that are really involved in his life and have a great deep relationship, like you guys said, like Guinan and Beverly, obviously. So the people he had the really strong personal not just
connection,
career,
not just professional,
not professional, but personal life for sure.
When like I said, when I envision which characters would maintain the close ties over a couple of decades after what we've seen, Crusher's the one that makes the most sense to me. But you could make a case for any of them being in communication with them and maintaining ties. I have the easiest time envisioning Crusher still being in the picture. And like you said, one of my favorite things about all things going back to the show with talking about that episode was what they did with Picard and Crusher. That I thought it was just I still think it's such a bold move to like say they got married and divorced. Like there was kind of a whole history there and it didn't work out. Like they
tried it, didn't work out. Yeah.
They gave the audience kind of like what they thought they wanted with. They ended up together, but it didn't work out well. Like that's such a bold and like cool, different idea. Like the easy thing to do is to say, they ended up together, or
happily
not.
Ever
they
after.
just didn't. It never happened. Happily ever after happened, or they just never did it.
Yeah.
But they found that middle ground where kind of it happened, but it's more complicated than which is life. That's what happens in life in a lot of cases. So I love that. And one of the things that you kind of mentioned a couple minutes ago is, how All Good Things might factor into this. Like, we got a little bit of a look at what 20 years, 25 years down the road could be. Yeah. Things like that illness he's dealing with.
Yeah.
Does that factor in? Was that, are they going to play into that at all? Are there elements of what we saw in All Good Things, either with his medical condition, with the tense relations with Klingons, and Worf being on the other side of that?
Yeah.
Deanna not being around, she dies at some point earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
Riker's an admiral. There's all kinds of things that you could do, or you could do in some sort of way to keep it kind of like it played out that way, but a little different.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Kelvin timelines thing. It's there's possible
similar enough to make sense. You could see it happening.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. I think a lot of people with that All Good Things in their head, I think it's going to be a really cool thing to watch All Good Things before this premieres, just to see if they play with that at all. Possibility. There's a very real possibility that something traumatic happens to Picard, and that could put a strain on his marriage to Beverly. And that does make sense, because they do seem to be, in a lot of the interviews that have come out with like Kurtzman, and I think Michael Chabon talked about it too, who's on the show.
Yeah.
As a writer, executive producer, that the thing that has him all messed up in the show, the Romulus thing, is what causes that divorce. So we'll see. A lot of really interesting possibilities, for sure.
Yes, for sure.
What did you think of the pictures that came out? Seen, like, the uniforms.
Yeah, the one that I've seen is the close up of him, obviously. And is there one of like kind of like a wide shot?
Yeah, evidently, I think it was yesterday. I think as the pictures were leaking, there was, I guess, a location shoot out in LA, and it looks an awful lot like it's like outside Starfleet headquarters, or Starfleet officers walking all over the place, and you see Picard like standing in the middle, in the same kind of costume that you see in the picture that came out a couple days ago, kind of like in a suit with no tie.
But it's like black, right?
Yeah, they look very similar to like the Voyager uniforms, black with like a colored top. But it looks like the colored top is like complete. Like there's no collar or shirt, like the purple top.
Yeah.
Like that purple collar's not there. It's just straight yellow if it's a yellow uniform.
But Picard's in black, right?
He's in straight black. To me, it looks like he's not in a Starfleet uniform.
That's
he's not in.
That's what kind of jumped out at me, is like there's this really like there's a bunch of color and busyness around him, and he's just like this black figure in the kind of the middle. I don't know, what that could mean, or the state of his character, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. There was good contrast there.
Definitely.
So.
Yeah, really interesting for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are talking about the uniforms in that. Like, people are questioning, does it make sense that 20 years later the uniforms look more like they did in
Season 1?
Voyager.
Or Voyager
than like the
Deep Space Nine.
The end of Deep Space Nine and First Contact movies. But
they went back. Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, the uniforms that they're wearing in TNG, like through the show, are more similar to TOS, like the colors, bright colors, than the movie uniforms with the red, the monster maroons.
Yeah.
Like, so Starfleet changes uniforms like we change our underwear. Like, come on, it'll be fine.
Yeah, and different. Maybe in Starfleet headquarters they have different uniforms than they do. People serving on ships, on Deep Space Nine, on other places. So I think that people need to chill. Yeah.
They've toyed with that going back. Like, people got to remember. Like, people, when Discovery happened this season, and they introduced the notion that the Constitution class ships have different uniforms than the people on the Discovery.
Exactly.
How about in TNG when season 6 is on and Deep Space Nine season 1 is on, and we have the crew on the Enterprise wearing a completely different uniform than the characters that are
boom.
Like,
there it is.
It's I mean, it's been pretty well established, I think, that like branches of the military have different uniforms.
Yes.
Branches of Starfleet might have slightly different looks depending on where you're serving and what kind of job you have.
Yeah.
What kind of mission you're on.
Yeah.
So.
What's the timeline of the show? When is it coming out?
They keep saying by the end of the year. I don't know what that means. I think a lot of people
So February.
December. Yeah, it could be February. I hope. It seems like they're very conscious after what happened in season 1, pushing it. I think
they're trying to keep that hard deadline for sure.
Yes.
After the backlash.
Yeah, I think that's the last thing they want. So if they're saying the end of the year, I take their word for it. I think that they're wise enough to try to avoid that mess again. So it's vague enough where it could be November, it could be December, it could be around the holidays. What? I'm ready for it. I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
I know from a production angle, one thing that they're doing that a lot of TV shows, like I think True Detective does it. I think House of Cards would do it. Is they kind of I read that the way they're having the directors. There's 10 episodes in a season.
Yeah.
The first season's 10 episodes long, and they have 5 directors coming in to do 2 episodes in a row. So each director is kind of doing like a little mini movie. Hanelle Culpepper, who directed Vaulting Ambition in season 1 and The Red Angel in season 2, is directing the first 2. Jonathan Frakes is directing 3 and 4. Love that.
The GOAT.
So
again.
Yeah, absolutely. But I kind of like that idea. It's a little different, and I think that tells you that maybe the structure of the show is going to be a little bit different than Discovery. Maybe even more serialized and more like running story than even Discovery is.
Yeah.
Like we talked a lot this season about how Discovery obviously is very serialized, but kind of maintains some level of each episode has its own thing. So we'll see. I think it's going to be interesting to see how different. And one of the things Alex Kurtzman rolled out, this idea of multiple shows and a lot of content coming and moving in a direction where in a couple of years you would have something Star Trek pretty much on the air all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of their ultimate goal. That one of their founding principles with trying to do that is that each show has to be different. Like it can't be like it was in the 90s where it's
similar,
different flavors of the same kind of thing. Every time.
Yeah.
So
back to the directors for just a quick second before we move on from that. I think there's going to be an element of consistency because I feel like in Discovery we would see with the different kind of rotating directors, kind of different styles to kind of each week.
Very much so.
So I feel like it might be a nice change to see some consistency between 1 or 2 episodes of kind of same direction, same cinematography. So that'll be a welcome change for me. Since we have a CBS All Access representative here with Bill, what do you think of kind of the Amazon Prime coming into this?
That's an interesting question for sure. It leads you to wonder if it's I don't have much stake in it because I live in the United States. Like it doesn't impact me personally, but I'm interested to know, like, did Netflix kind of choose not to pursue the Picard show? Is it just a bidding war thing? Like, is Netflix satisfied with we have Discovery and we don't want it, and Amazon stepped in and did it, or is it a matter of Amazon paid a whole lot of money for this and more than Netflix wanted to pay? I don't know. I would be fine with it because I have Netflix in it. I imagine if I live in the UK and I'm not one to have multiple. I'm not the kind of person that has multiple streaming options. It might annoy me.
Right.
But yeah, if Rob's still here, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts because you live in the UK, Rob. But I know you said you had to go, so I'm thinking maybe you're not around anymore. But yeah, I'd be curious to hear the perspective.
Yeah, Adam is saying that from his understanding, it was a bidding war type of thing, but I haven't heard that for sure. Yeah, I mean,
I would imagine
pretty much who's got the deepest pockets. I feel like Amazon is so big that maybe they're trying to get something from Netflix to kind of fill up their
Sure.
Lineup. Yeah, I have no problem with it. I'll be still wholeheartedly shelling my money to CBS All Access, which I'm fine doing because I've had no hiccups so far, knock on wood, with it. So,
yeah, I'm curious to ask you because I haven't talked to you about this in a long time. Maybe even going back to like the early part of season 1. But throughout the 2 seasons of Discovery, how often would you have technical problems trying to watch the show? Because I still see on Twitter every once in a while you hear people complaining that they have issues with the app and it not working. But in my experience, I had one night, and it was the night Lethe aired, that it was struggling. I remember that, and I was pissed. I was really not happy.
Yeah.
But other than that one little hiccup, and it worked. It was just there was like a hiccup in it. There was like an echo in it or something. There was a little thing. It was like annoying. It was just an irritation. It wasn't not working completely. But have you had any issues with?
I've never had any technical issues watching the show. I've watched it right when it aired. I watched it 3 hours later. So I've had both sides of the coin. No issues at all. The app itself is clunky. I mean, that's to be expected on a new platform like that. So, I mean, people compare it to Netflix, but Netflix has had this app being refined for years, and CBS All Access, just came out a couple of years ago. So definitely take that with a grain of salt, but I've had no issues. So
glad to hear it. Yeah. And it's like not. I read that from. What made me ask the question is just about a week ago I saw like a movie blogger that I follow who used to work at Variety and covered a lot of like Oscar coverage kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I follow him on my Twitter, and he was going off about the app, giving him problems trying to watch Twilight Zone. And so this is like he's a young guy. He's probably our age, maybe a little older than us, in our age group.
Yeah.
This is not an elderly gentleman who doesn't have a lot of experience dealing with technology, that sort of person. And this is a very tech savvy, smart guy. And he was letting CBS All Access have it, that it just wasn't working. So I was curious to hear.
Yeah, I've had no issues. I use it on my phone. I'm an iPhone user, and I have Google Chrome for the TV. My response to that is I watched all of season 1 of TNG just because I wanted to see how the app held up. No problems at all. No problems. So I don't know.
And you live currently on an island with not necessarily.
Yeah, I live in, like, you probably had, like, the cream of the crop of, internet bandwidth. Not me. I'm kind of, like, on the extreme, right? I don't know. I think that people should, take it easy on CBS All Access because, at least for me and my experience, it's been fine.
Nice.
Yeah.
Glad to hear it. If it's working for you where you are right now,
then it should.
Yeah. It seems it should be working for most people.
Exactly. So, yep. Yeah. Anything else?
No, not really. I don't think.
Yeah, I guess we should start wrapping it up.
Yeah.
Star Trek content. Trek ranks. They have a really cool idea. The shapes. I think that's a really out of the box kind of thinking type of episode. So definitely check that out.
Thought of it.
And then tonight, I feel like if we're still on, Bill, what content do we have?
We are hoping to have we did it a few weeks ago, maybe about a month ago now. A Trek After Dark, we call it. Not streamed online in any kind of way. If you're on our Discord server, we start an audio video call, and we just kind of hang out and eventually maybe watch some Star Trek together and kind of talk about it, do our own friendly audio commentary to whatever we're watching.
Yep.
So if you're sitting around and bored, not having a whole lot to do tonight, probably in about 11 or 12 hours, maybe a little later tonight, check out our Discord if you're on there. We will push it on Twitter. We'll push it on Discord if you're already on the server. But we're looking to maybe have a little bit of a hangout, do maybe some Star Trek trivia.
Yes,
for
there will be
whoever's
trivia.
online.
Yep.
There will be trivia,
Yep.
and there will be maybe some Star Trek watching, and perhaps a Synth Hall consumed or 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Maybe none, depending
We'll
on
see.
who you are.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes from there. Yeah, so it should be a really good time. Definitely keep an eye on our Twitter and our Facebook and the Discord for all the details for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think that's it.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Yep. We'll hope to see you guys a little bit later on today. If not, in the future on Twitter,
Yeah.
all those places. So check it out.
Absolutely. Yep.